Hello everybody, it's NerdGasm. Today, in this installment of Supervillain Breakdown, I wanted to look at Darkseid, one of the greatest and most powerful supervillains ever conceived in comics. Now, I have done a breakdown video on this character before, but I found my research for it to be lacking. The same goes for the comic book images I used in it. I was lazy, didn't do enough investigative work for them, tracking down the best ones I could find, from specific issues and everything. So, we're gonna do it all again, better this time. I'm a perfectionist, and wanted to do justice for Darkseid, because he deserves it. As a quick side note, I did release a breakdown of Steppenwolf alongside this one, so check that video out if you'd like more information on Darkseid's uncle, the general of his army. But right now, we are going to focus on the big guy himself. When most people think of Darkseid as a villain, they associate him with the Justice League, and even more specifically, the Man of Steel. But Darkseid didn't debut as a villain of those heroes. In fact, he didn't really debut as part of the main DC universe for that matter either. No, he was originally part of Jack Kirby's fourth world of stories, which centered around a race of outer space deities, known as the New Gods, who fought an endless war on two rivaling twin planets, New Genesis and Apocalypse, which represented positive and negative, heaven and hell, good versus evil. New Genesis is a beautiful and vibrant paradise, a nirvana, led by a Christ or Moses-like figure known as Highfather, and Apocalypse is a dark and desolate planet covered in fire pits and governed by an oppressive, cruel, and unmerciful tyrant, Darkseid. He enslaves the people of Apocalypse and crushes their spirit through the use of fear, and due to this, they become dependent on their master and remain loyal to him until the very end, if need be. Apocalypse and New Genesis exist on an entirely different plane of existence than the rest of the DC universe. The only way to get there is through an extra-dimensional portal known as a boom tube. These are activated with mother boxes, small rectangular or cube-like devices that are part machine and part sentient. They access a limitless energy known as the Source, which is basically the consciousness of the entire DC universe, and what gives the New Gods their powers. Darkseid, the New Gods, the planet Apocalypse and New Genesis, the Mother Boxes, the Source, all of these concepts were kept separate from the main DC Comics continuity for quite some time. Though Jack Kirby's Fourth World debuted in 1971, his characters wouldn't find themselves really integrated into the rest of the DC universe until 1980, with the crossover Crisis Between Two Earths. Up until that point, they were completely separate, and Darkseid and the Justice League would never be spoken about in the same sentence, let alone be considered mortal enemies or anything like that. Following Crisis Between Two Earths, the villain would make cameos in stories centering around Superman, the Suicide Squad, and Swamp Thing, among others, before finally firmly establishing himself as a full-fledged villain of the Justice League come the 1990s, and the rest is, well, history, as they say. I think a major factor in solidifying Darkseid as a huge threat and primary antagonist of both Superman and the rest of the Justice League as well would have to be his appearance in Superman the Animated Series, and the rest of the DC Animated Universe for that matter too. It introduced him and the entirety of Jack Kirby's Fourth World to mainstream audiences. I don't think Darkseid and the New Gods would have as much appeal outside of the comics if not for them. The mighty Darkseid was born Euxis of the royal family of Apocalypse, the son of Queen Hegra and the former king Yuga Khan. Euxis and his brother Drax, also known later as the Infinity Man, who would serve Highfather on New Genesis, would battle for hundreds of years within a place called the Infinity Pit, fighting for what is considered to be the ultimate power in the universe, the Omega Effect, or Omega Force, their supposed birthright. Euxis would win this battle, and the Omega Force would be absorbed into his body, covering him in a stone-like chrysalis and turning him into the being known as Darkseid. With his father, Yuga Khan, having been lost in the Source Wall, the protective barrier separating the multiverse and the Source, many years ago, Darkseid would turn his attention to his mother Hegra and have her poisoned by his henchman Darkseid, a bit more on him later, to become the absolute ruler of Apocalypse. Darkseid's origin was altered quite a bit in DC's New 52 continuity, having him be a mud farmer on a planet whose gods were giants. They didn't respect the smaller beings of the planet, trampling their homes and destroying all of their hard work. Euxis hated the gods, and while they slept, he killed each of them, one by one, using a scythe, and stole their power for his own. He would then become the being known as Darkseid, destroy the planet, and then create a new world called Apocalypse. While this backstory to Darkseid isn't as interesting as his original was, in my opinion, its similarities to the story of Kronos in Greek mythology is pretty cool, and gets some brownie points with me, being a fan of ancient history and all. The symbol closely associated with Darkseid is the Omega symbol, the last letter of the Greek alphabet, that represents the end, the death, the final. It also represents the source of Darkseid's power, the previously mentioned Omega Force. Drawing from this energy, Darkseid is able to fire powerful blasts from his eyes, known as the Omega Beams. They are capable of completely disintegrating their targets, wipe them from existence entirely. Using his Omega Beams, Darkseid can teleport his victims through space and time, throughout different realities, and only he has the power to bring them back, which of course is a rare occurrence. I've always found the Omega Beams to be so cool because they can bend, curve, and zigzag to track down their targets. Darkseid doesn't even have to be facing the direction of his victim in order to hit them. It's awesome. They can pass through basically everything, and only a select few characters in the DC universe can withstand a direct hit from them. We know Superman can, but Batman, not so much. Most stories featuring Darkseid have him seeking some variation of the anti-life equation, an otherworldly mathematical formula that essentially proves all of life to be meaningless. Anyone who knows this equation can dominate the will of any sentient race, and this is the ultimate goal of Darkseid, to completely eliminate all hope and free will across the universe, with him acting as the absolute ruler of all there is. Darkseid has several high-ranking warriors that serve below him, known as Darkseid's elite. You have Kalibak, Darkseid's eldest son, a beast-like brute who does a lot of the heavy lifting, but, despite his loyalty, has failed his father too many times to count, and their relationship has become fractured as a result. Darkseid, Darkseid's chief torturer, who gets sick pleasure out of inflicting pain on others. I swear this guy climaxes in his robe sometimes. Granny Goodness, the old crazy bitch who was in charge of training new soldiers for Darkseid in these twisted orphanage-like brainwashing centers. She is also the supervisor of the Female Furies, a team of all-female warriors. And of course, you have Steppenwolf, Darkseid's uncle and general of the Apocalyptic Army. Darkseid is one of the most ruthless and intimidating villains in comic book history. His rule over Apocalypse discusses many themes related to dictatorships, oppression, good versus evil, everything along those lines. Apocalypse is such a fitting environment for this type of character, and the dark and depressing visuals only strengthen these ideas. I love the creepy and unorthodox technology used by the planet as well, very scrap metal-like at times, and the twisted laboratories and experiments that go on there are unsettling. They remind me of some other notable villains, such as Apocalypse from the X-Men, or even Doctor Doom from the Fantastic Four to a certain extent. Darkseid is one of the most powerful beings in the DC universe. Very few characters can match his strength and abilities. The Justice League, arguably DC's strongest fighting force, even struggle to keep up with him at times. The battles he has had with Superman are some of the most brutal and hard-hitting you'll find in the comic book medium, especially pertaining to superheroes. Superman has managed to defeat Darkseid before, but just barely, and of course, he has always managed to return and wreak even more havoc on the universe. Darkseid is always compared to Marvel's Thanos. Who would win in a fight? Who is better? I don't care much for that argument because it's a waste of time, in my opinion. Just more fan-based tribalism, which ruins comic books and superheroes for the true fans that respect both Marvel and DC for their amazing stories and libraries of interesting characters. Darkseid and Thanos both have their share of pros and cons, and I wouldn't consider either of them to be necessarily perfect. The main issue I have with Darkseid, and really the New Gods as a whole, which I mean doesn't affect my enjoyment of these characters at all, but is something I do still want to bring up in this video, is the fact that so much of the concepts surrounding them have yet to be fully explained and defined in the comics, and many of the writers over the years have taken it upon themselves to add new powers and aspects to everything that complicate them even further. There has never been a real consistency to them. Again, I mean no disrespect to Darkseid or the rest of the New Gods. I find them to be endlessly fascinating, but you do have to admit the Omega Force, the Mother Boxes, the Source, the anti-life equation, all of these concepts can be really hard to specify in both a written and visual form. It must be challenging for some of these artists and writers to accomplish some of this stuff, even factoring in the suspension of disbelief and everything. And that's one of the biggest similarities characters like Darkseid and Thanos have with one another, because Thanos and his Infinity Gauntlet suffers from a lot of the same weaknesses at times, and I mentioned it in my review of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline from 1991. It's difficult to visualize some of these universe and reality-bending concepts. It can be hard for audiences to wrap their head around them if they are not explained well enough, and as a result, they might become a bit disconnected from these stories, or these kinds of characters in general, which is a real shame. Once again, I mean no disrespect to Darkseid or Thanos. I love both of these characters as villains, but I hope those of you watching this video understand where I am coming from with all of this, what I'm trying to say. I want to thank everyone for watching my breakdown of Darkseid. Let me know what you think of the character in the comment section down below. If you'd like to support the channel and wish to see more content like this in the future, please subscribe and hit that bell icon to receive all notifications. Also, if you can, become a patron over on patreon.com to gain access to exclusive episodes of my podcast and take part in monthly polls that determine topics of future videos. I will see you all in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.